It's tougher to be an informed voter in Colorado than in other places. What with all of our ballot issues and propositions you have to sift through. The Blue Book Voter Guide is 120 pages this year. If you're thinking that nobody reads that thing, I think they do, because there's a lawsuit over what is in it about an amendment to change our taxes. I'll have your attention now. Here's Steve Steger.
Oh, still on mute.
Gosh, I love Zoom press conferences.
It's up at the top. Sometimes, are you on an iPad?
They could be awfully complex.
Is there a teenager in the house?
Speaking of complexity, have you heard about Amendment B? Voters will get to choose whether or not to repeal the Gallagher Amendment. That's a subject I'll let Marshall explain in greater length someday. But the simplest way to describe it, the Gallagher Amendment requires 55% of state property taxes to be collected from non-residential property owners. Homeowners pay the other 45%. As home values have increased across the state, residential tax assessment rates have stayed low to keep that ratio in the same place. There's a much more detailed description about that in the Blue Book you're about to get, and that is where this story comes in.
In 3 minutes, they totally changed the language of Amendment B in the Blue Book.
Protect Our Homes Colorado, the group against Amendment B, is suing the state legislature, claiming lawmakers injected a campaign ad for Amendment B into the Blue Book at the last minute. The Blue Book, which is supposed to be
A fair and impartial explanation, plus pros and cons provided by interested citizens.
Each election cycle, the Nonpartisan Legislative Research Council spends months researching all arguments about everything that appears on your ballot. They interview people with interests on both sides. They write drafts, get feedback from both sides, write more drafts. Then before they publish the book, they present it to a committee of lawmakers who have the final say. Usually their changes are small, but this year they changed a lot, starting with the top.
They changed the title
From modify property taxes to repeal Gallagher Amendment. Those opposed to repealing Gallagher say the new language creates the impression that taxes won't increase when they likely will.
They made wholesale changes that basically turned the Blue Book language on Amendment B into campaign propaganda for the yes vote.
So the Blue Book heads to the printer tomorrow to be mailed to voters by October 2nd. That is the constitutional latest date that this can be mailed out. The group is trying to ask a judge for a temporary restraining order to stop the printing and get a judge's ruling on whether or not what the legislature did here was in line with the Constitution, and they expect that a judge will rule on that rather quickly, Kyle.
Literally stop the presses. What would it take to change the language?
So in this case, what it took for the legislature to change the language was a 2/3 majority. So it took an awful lot of that committee to vote for these changes. That's been the argument of the other side of lawmakers who say that these are acceptable. As far as what it would take to stop the presses, it would take a judge's order in Denver District Court, which is where this lawsuit has been filed.
Steve Steger wearing the official uniform of Men Across Colorado. Steve, thank you.